Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Zara Seidler.
I'm Emma Gillespie.
Yesterday, former Liberal staffer Bruce Lehrmann lost the appeal of his failed defamation case against Network 10 and journalist Lisa Wilkinson. It comes after the federal court ruled last year that it was more likely than not that Lehrmann raped Brittany Higgins at Parliament House back in 2019. In today's podcast, we're going to explain this latest judgment and what it means for the very long-running case.
Okay, Zara, we have covered this case many times over the past several years. It has been a long-running saga and a pretty difficult one to keep up with, I think, if you are just in the general public dipping in and out. But for anyone who might have forgotten or might be confused, what is the background to this appeal that we need to know about?
Yeah, you're right. This has had many turns and many twists, but what you need to know is that Bruce Lehrmann, who I mentioned at the top, is a former Liberal staffer, launched defamation proceedings over an interview broadcast on 10's The Project in 2021. That show is no longer even running, and I think that shows how long this has been going on for.
Yeah.
During that interview, Brittany Higgins, also a former Liberal staffer, alleged to journalist Lisa Wilkinson that Lehrmann had raped her in Parliament House in March 2019. Lehrmann, who to this day maintains his innocence, was not named in the interview either by Higgins nor by Wilkinson. However, Bruce Lehrmann has alleged that his reputation was damaged and as such that he was defamed because he was identifiable. So his name was not said, but he argued at the time that his identity was still clear.
Okay, that people who maybe knew him, knew his job, could have pieced together the details from the interview and landed on him being the alleged suspect.
Exactly. And it was on that basis that Bruce Lehrmann brought a defamation case against both Network 10 and Lisa Wilkinson. Now, fast forward to that case. One of the ways to defend a defamation case is to prove that the claims made were truthful. And so that is what both Wilkinson and 10 used during that case as a defense.
So they said, in a nutshell, we did not defame Bruce Lehrmann because the claims aired in the interview are true.
Correct. That is what they argued. And we had a judgment back in 2024. At the time, Justice Michael Lee ruled the claims laid out by Wilkinson and 10 that Lehrmann raped Higgins were true on the balance of probabilities. So more likely than not that those claims were true. Important to note that this was a civil case. It was not a criminal case. And so that standard of proof was a bit lower than it is in a criminal case.
Yeah. So civil, balance of probabilities, criminal case, a claim has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Slightly different.
Yes. But that was found to be the case in this specific defamation case. Now, there was a lot said in that judgment. We've done a bunch of podcasts on that. So I won't rehash everything that was said by Justice Lee at the time. But I do think that it's important to note that Lee's ruling stated that Lehrmann could not have been defamed because the allegations were truthful. Many listeners will remember the now famous line from Lee, who, when he handed down the judgment, said, and I quote, "Having escaped the lion's den, Lehrmann made the mistake of going back for his hat." At the time, the court ordered Bruce Lehrmann to pay $2 million in legal costs.
So Justice Lee's assertion there being that there were these allegations of rape, but Lehrmann decided to fight against them with this defamation case, ultimately, in his perspective, wasting the court's time. There were those costs that were ordered to be paid. So the ruling was that Lehrmann was not defamed.
Yeah.
That was in 2024, last year.
Yeah.
It's now nearly the end of 2025 and we are still talking about this. Why is that?
Well, if we're to continue with Justice Lee's turn of phrase, Bruce Lehrmann went back into the lion's den yet again when he filed an appeal against Lee's findings on 4 main grounds. So he appealed the failed defamation case. He appealed on the basis that he believed he was denied fairness on some of the claims made against him and that Justice Lee had erred in accepting the truth defense. And so we had a full bench of the federal court, so 3 judges who weren't involved in the original case. They heard the appeal, and that was a little while ago. At the time, Lehrmann's lawyer, Zali Burrows, told the court that he was probably Australia's most hated man, and she cited abusive social media posts directed at him. She argued that Justice Lee in the defamation case had turned it into an unfair quasi-rape trial. So that was essentially just giving you a bit of colour as to what Bruce Lehrmann and his lawyer were arguing.
Mm-hmm.
That hearing wrapped up early at the end of the second day after the panel of federal court judges said they struggled to understand Burrows' argument.
Yeah, I remember this unfolding earlier in the year, and we were expecting the appeals hearings to last a lot longer than those 2 days. It all ended quite abruptly at the time, and there was some confusion as to why, and it came down to that legal argument.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the result from that appeal yesterday.
Yeah.
Some months in between the hearings ending and that final word being handed down. What was it?
Hello, Billy here from TDA. We have just looked at our YouTube analytics and 95% of you who are watching our videos aren't subscribing. If you want to help independent media like us grow, the best way you can do that is by pressing subscribe. Thank you so much, and back to the video.
Lehrmann's appeal was rejected. So Justice Michael Wigney, who is not Justice Lee, different person. He explained the panel of judges' reasoning for dismissing the appeal. He said that the judges found that Lee had not denied Lehrmann fairness in the defamation case. He also said, and I thought that this was interesting, that the judges had concluded that Lehrmann knew Higgins had not consented to sex.
Mm-hmm.
That was a different finding to what Justice Lee had found, and it was almost elevating what they understood to have happened at the time in front of the law. Lehrmann's appeal was dismissed, as I said, and he was again ordered to pay the other side's costs.
So we have this fresh panel of judges reassessing what went on in those initial defamation proceedings, ultimately upholding Justice Michael Lee's findings, also finding that he acted fairly and reaffirming essentially the truth defense that Lehrmann did rape Higgins, according to the court. So he's lost his defamation case. He's lost his subsequent appeal. What happens now for Bruce Lehrmann?
Yeah, so he could try to appeal this decision in the High Court.
Okay, so elevating from the federal court where these proceedings have been, taking it to a more senior court.
Yeah, exactly. So in Australia, there are many avenues to appeal a case. The High Court, though, as I said, is the highest point that a case can get. And it doesn't automatically consider appeals. So it's not like Bruce Lehrmann can ask for it to be heard and that's what happens. Lehrmann would need to first seek permission for his appeal to be heard. And it's only if that appeal is accepted that it can progress. For example, with Ben Roberts-Smith, he did this. He requested that the court hear his appeal and they rejected that.
Okay.
If that happens, that is the end of the road for appeals and the federal court's judgment is final. So there would be no other avenues for Bruce Lehrmann to continue to try and progress this case.
Do we know if he is planning to appeal the appeal?
Lots of appeals in that one sentence. Yes, AAP is reporting that Lehrmann is planning to appeal his appeal. So we're going to have to wait and see if that's the case. There are obviously costs involved as well. So we'll keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, and I think if we look at what Bruce Lehrmann's lawyer, Zali Burrows, was saying outside of court yesterday, it certainly sounds like they are maybe interested in continuing to defend this. Burrows said, quote, "Bruce is really overwhelmed. I just want everyone to remember that at the heart of the matter, we have a young man who was accused of rape at Parliament House. Bruce's life has been destroyed." Yeah,
and that's certainly the type of language that's been used this whole time.
Yes, exactly.
I should say not just in this case, but in other cases. So not to confuse listeners, but this is likely not to be the last time that we hear about Bruce Lehrmann in the headlines, even this week. Bruce Lehrmann is actually also due to face court in Tasmania today for a separate case. That is in regards to an allegation that he stole a car in Tasmania in November last year.
Right.
And that case has been postponed for a number of reasons. Lehrmann's lawyers argued that there were medical reasons why he couldn't appear before the court. And so that's been delayed until now, where he is again, as I said, expected to face court on that charge.
Completely separate to the defamation and the Parliament House allegations.
Correct. But there is also another case.
A third one.
There is a third and also separate case. Bruce Lehrmann has also been accused of rape in Toowoomba in Queensland. While the defamation case that we've been speaking about throughout this podcast is a civil case, as I mentioned, this one is a criminal case in regards to the charge of rape. These charges were first heard in court in January of 2023, and that trial is forthcoming. We don't really have much more information. We do know that Zali Burrows, the lawyer who has defended Bruce Lehrmann in the civil case, is expected to be defending him here as well. So again, there is a lot happening, a lot of different court cases all kind of happening at the same time, but we will be sure to update listeners as we learn more.
Thank you so much, Zara, for breaking that all down for us. So just to recap, the appeal could yet be appealed in the High Court, TBC. Lehrmann is appearing in Tasmania for a separate case this week about the alleged stolen car. And there is that criminal case regarding the rape allegation in Toowoomba, Queensland.
Correct.
Lots to keep an eye on, and we will continue to do so here at the Daily Aus. Zara, thank you so much.
Thank you, Em, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Daily Aus. If you need support, please reach out to 1-800-RESPECT. Take care of yourself, and we'll be back again later today.